Thank you for joining us. This is the first episode of the U Show. My name is Greg Herbert. I am pleased to be joined by parliamentarian Senator Vincent Byron, also Queen's Counsel.
Not yet.
Thank you for joining us, Mr. Byron.
Thank you very much, Greg, for inviting me along. It's a pleasure to be able to give a few thoughts on the current situation in our country, and especially in light of what seems to be something of a concern, deep concern, that at a time when Parliament has been dissolved and we have set a date for general elections on the 16th of February 2015. I take it that you give me the mic so that I can expound.
Well,
or you have any questions?
Let me just set it up, because we are aware that we are currently at a somewhat of a impasse.
Yes.
And it involves legal proceedings in the court.
Yes.
But a story doesn't have an end. We don't get here without the backstory.
Yes.
We know this came out of certain things that were done on the 16th of last month.
Yes.
And people considered it to be improper in some ways.
Yeah.
You are one of those people who felt aggrieved by this.
Yes.
And we would like you to give us the backstory and bring us up to now. So I turn the mic over to you and let you give us the story.
Yeah. Thank you, Greg. I think I need to go back before the 16th of January. That is, the 16th of January is a critical date, Friday, 16th January, because that was the date when there was Parliament. And the Parliament moved very hastily to pass a resolution that was intended to change constituency boundaries, electoral boundaries in St.Kitts and Nevis. At the same time, when that was done, shortly after, Parliament was dissolved. So there is no Parliament. And so when Parliament dissolved, there's a constitutional mandate that an election be held within 90 days. And so we have become, as it was in the electoral system and the electoral campaign season, a date has been set for elections on the 16th of February, a couple of Mondays from now. The entire issue surrounds the constituency boundaries. On what boundaries will members of Parliament be elected for the next term? And that is important because, according to our Constitution, the person who commands the majority of the elected representatives in Parliament is to be the Prime Minister. He forms a cabinet with him, and they form the executive. They run the government, what we call the government. And so when we see that the whole issue of these constitutional boundaries, the fact that it leads to the election of representatives and the majority supports an individual to be Prime Minister, we have to go back. Because this is at the tail end of some 2 years and more, 2 years and a month, that an elected majority of members in the Parliament have stated unequivocally, in writing, that they support somebody other than the current sitting Prime Minister. And I refer to the fact that on the 11th of December, 2012, that a motion of no confidence was filed with the clerk of the National Assembly. Once a motion is filed with the clerk, it is brought to the attention of the Speaker, who should table the motion for debate, and then having debated it, you then will vote on such a motion. If the people who filed the motion of no confidence are successful, then the person who is then the Prime Minister has 3 days in which to resign, or automatically the Governor General will dissolve and call a general election.
Right.
So the question of the boundaries has to do with the election, but it's coming out of this whole issue of the motion of no confidence that has been a blot on our country for more than 2 years. And it's important to understand that. It would seem that one of the factors why we have had to wait so long to reach this point is that the minority elected members in Parliament, led by Dr. Denzel Douglas, have felt that it would give them an advantage to change electoral boundaries. And so there has been a process to do so before they will go to election for the next general elections. Having said that, it's important to state that the process of changing electoral boundaries began in August of 2012. I was appointed to the Constitutional Boundaries Commission by His Excellency the Governor General on the 2nd of August 2012 as a member, a nominated member on the opposition benches in Parliament. And along with Premier Vance Amory, who is also in Parliament, both of us were appointed by the leader of the opposition, according to the Constitution. The current Deputy Prime Minister, Earl Asim Martin, and the chairman of the Labour Party, the Honourable Marcella Liebert, were both appointed to the commission by the Prime Minister. The Governor General, in his own deliberate judgment, having consulted the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition, appointed Mr. Peter Jenkins as the chairman of the commission. So you have 2 members from each side of the House on the commission, and it is expected that the Governor General, in doing his duty, would select somebody who is impartial, who would then have, as it was, a casting vote if there's going to be any sort of differences between these 4 others.
Well, before we go any further, can we just clear up what is the role of this commission?
The commission is a constitutional commission. Section 49 and Section 50 of our Constitution has 2 basic functions. We are to review the constituency boundaries, the electoral boundaries in St. Kitts and Nevis. And we are to find out, having reviewed them, if it is that there needs to be a change or if there's a need not to change. So it's not just because we must change. We can say no change is necessary, or we can say a change is necessary. And there are certain criteria we use to do that. The criteria is that we say that the constituencies should have near equality in the number of inhabitants in each constituency. But we can depart from this equality, bearing in mind certain other factors. And the Constitution lists administrative divisions. It is sparsely populated rural areas. They look at geographic considerations. Those are basically some of them. There's one other I can't recall automatically. But those can, if there are critical factors, can lead us to depart from the question of equality. And so we meet, and we we can be assisted by people, and we can make our own rules and so forth. Our objective is that, having reviewed the boundaries, we are to produce a report that we submit to the Governor General. He then in turn would submit it to the Prime Minister, who will then make a resolution that is put in Parliament for debate. And if the debate is passed, however it is, the resolution is passed by a majority vote, then that is in the form of a proclamation. It then carried to the Governor General for his signature. Now, it's important to note that once it gets to the Governor General and he signs this proclamation, it has to be gazetted. It has to be placed in the official gazette of St. Kitts and Nevis. Once that is done, at the next dissolution of Parliament, any changes that were in that proclamation, in that resolution, would take effect, and the boundaries will come into being at the next dissolution of Parliament.
Okay.
So this is the background to all of this. We met first in proper sessions on the 27th of February, 2013. And we met for a number of months. And on September the 5th, 2013, a report was produced. And this report went to the Governor General on the 6th, the next day. And on the 9th, it went to Parliament. The resolution went to Parliament. But the elected opposition felt that there were a number of things wrong with the report. And so they applied to the court on the 9th, the very morning, to have a judicial review of the boundaries report, and were able to obtain an injunction against its use. Mm-hmm. That injunction restrained the Governor General from making use of the report, signing it. And that stayed in place until July 31st last year, when a court case, the review had been done, and the judgment of Mr. Justice Ramdani struck down the report. When I say struck down, said that the report was null and void and of no effect.
Okay.
He did so because the process of consultation by which the report was done was found to be improper. It was not done properly. And so what do we mean by consultation? The Commission had invited registered political parties in the Federation to submit proposals to be used in our deliberations. At the time when we invited political parties to do so, Mr. Condor and Mr. Harris, Dr. Harris, were not part of any party. They were, however, members of Parliament, and each of them were invited individually to make proposals. They subsequently formed the People's Labour Party, PLP, but still they have been consulted as individuals since then. Most people submitted everybody submitted something to the Commission. I should say that really ultimately the members of the Commission themselves had to do their own proposals. So each one of us did our own proposals. This, of course, occurred after we had invited certain technical experts to come and meet with us. We had the acting permanent secretary in the Ministry of Sustainable Development, Ms. Beverly Harris. she was the person responsible for the 2011 census. So she would know about the population figures. And the department had produced preliminary census data, which was given to us as members of the commission, which were given to all of the people consulted, who we call the consultees. So everybody got this preliminary census data to use in our discussions, how we go about it. We got a copy of the Constitution, we got other things to support us. And so we had these visits from four technical experts. Miss Beverly Harris came to explain some of the data in the preliminary census data. You had Mr. James Buchanan, he was a local land surveyor, came and explained about locations and so on. You had a talk from Mr. Randolph Moving, I think it is, who is the director of physical planning, and his counterpart in Nevis, Ms. Delpesh, also came and spoke to us. So we had these people came in. There was a certain amount of interaction. I was curious from the beginning that the data that had been given us as preliminary census data was not final data. And there are processes that would have to go on even after people in the field did raw counting. There would be the question of computer analysis, where, for instance, you can have an account of somebody, but then you can't have a mother who is 2 years old,
right,
or a baby. And so there would be all sorts of analytical and computer programs that would give you different counts, apart from actually going back into the field and doing other counting. So the process, to me, was not completed. And should we have been making decisions of this nature with what I considered incomplete data?
Incomplete data.
And so it had been an ongoing discussion for me. I also have had indirect concern, and I must say it has not been part of the record per se, but over the last few months it has become an issue. How one of the tables that was critical to the discussion was named a table population by communities, in which the census office put together enumeration districts and formed communities out of them. It's important to understand what enumeration districts are. When you do a census, we produce data by the total country, the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. We produce data by the island of St. Kitts and the island of Nevis. And in each of those two islands, there are parishes. So you also are going to produce data by parish. And finally, to get to that parish data and to get that island data, you have to start from a small count. The smallest unit by which you're going to count, and you add them together.
Okay.
To get, as it were, the parish data is called an enumeration district. One person, an enumerator, goes into a clearly defined area and counts every building and every household and every person in that enumeration district. That is how a census is done. So that you'd have a number of enumeration districts bordering each other, and they add up to the population for the whole parish.
Okay.
So you cannot have a census count without an enumeration district. In 1991 census, it was introduced in St. Kitts and Nevis that each enumeration district had to have a map. So you then see the definition of what that enumeration district would be. And so maps and enumeration districts form the basis of the population count. we were not provided with these. What was done for us was that the enumeration districts were put together and called communities. A classic example, for instance, would be the town of Sandy Point. Sandy Point is the parish of St. Anne. So as the parish of St. Anne would give you a total population district, in this case 2,798 inhabitants in the population of St. Anne's, which is the town of Sandy Point. The community we were given in the table of communities was Sandy Point, 2,798 inhabitants, flat. So whereas you may have had as many as 12 or more enumeration districts in Sandy Point, we just had one figure for Sandy Point. And that type of thing happened elsewhere in other parishes and other locations, both in St. Kitts and in Nevis. So to be able to make informed decisions how best to adjust inhabitants in a constituency or in a parish based on the communities, we did not have the smaller area data that was critical. And for me, it has been one of the sticking points for the last 2 years that we've been working on the census data, and which, in my opinion, is why a lot of what we would do would be flawed. Okay? So this is what happened. We had this data, we had this help from these experts, and recommendations came in. And having come in, the recommendations then were the chairman did a synthesis of all the recommendations and brought them back to the commission. They were voted on, and the majority, the two members nominated by the Prime Minister and the chairman, voted together and accepted the report.
With this flawed data?
With the data.
Right.
But why? So there was a question about data. Should we use preliminary census data? The other question was, should we, was the process of consultation proper? And there was the third point, and this went to more substantive things, was the chairman of the commission impaired by the appearance of bias. And in this case, the chairman had been a former member of the Labour Party executive. He was involved in many government jobs. He was getting certain contracts that the claimants felt would influence him towards the government position, and therefore would constitute an appearance of bias. So these were the three bases on which the matter went to court. And in terms of why the court ultimately struck down that first report, they did so on the question on the issue of consultation. Consultation, the court was saying, was that it has to be fair and proper. I can tell you as a public body, as I said, the commission, that you tell me what you want to do, and I say thank you very much, and I go away and then make a decision that. The consultation should be that I, as a public body, even if I do that first, invite you to give me some ideas what you like, I should make recommendations. The commission should make recommendations, preliminary recommendations, and then tell you, as somebody consulted, this is what we as a commission wants to do. Tell me if you agree with it or not. Make suggestions how we could do it differently. You send it back to us, and that point we then would make, as it was, final recommendations, which really let you know again. So the consultation process is not just thank you and I make a decision. It's an important factor that I think comes to this whole basis of governance in our country, that team unity, has been speaking about. The issue where we need to consult more. We cannot be high-handed, that a government department says, I'm going to do so and so, and you take it or leave it. But that the people must have an input and must be told, I'm going to do so, can be able to critique it, accept it, criticize it, ultimately. So that is the basis. The commission ultimately will make the decision. But there must be a proper process once you agree to embark on it. Mm-hmm. And so the court found that that process that was done was improper. I could go more into it. For instance, on July the 18th, 2013, I felt that the commission owed a duty to the population, to the citizens, to go to the communities that were being affected and have a public discussion. Have people from the community come and say, boy, look, I with St. Peter's and Keon linked together. Green Hill and us, we linked together since 1952.
Right.
I don't think we should break up this thing.
Correct.
You know what I mean? For whatever reason. In Sandy Point, they would say, look, Sandy Point has been a community for a long time. Not that that is a constitutional provision, but it's the basis by which we can have, as it was, this type of discussion and be informed as a commission in terms of consultation. Mm-hmm. When I made that recommendation, we were voted down 3-1. Premier Ami was there, but the other members did not want to do that. They felt that was not the mandate that we had, and so on. But that is not the reason why the court did not accept it. They felt more that having made recommendations, the commission did not let the people consulted comment on them and have an input based on that. So it was struck down as a result of that, as improper. The court did not find at the time that the chairman had shown an appearance of bias. So they did not accept that point. And they felt that they would not get involved in the issue of the data, and they did not fight for the data either. So it was on this consultation issue. The commission then continues to meet, because we reviewed, we are commissioned. And we met again 27th of August last year, and we kept meeting up until December. On the 2nd of December, we finally reviewed, made recommendations, final recommendations for St. Kitts. On the 15th of December for Nevis. And I want to go back again to show the process here again. We did not invite back the technical experts. But what we did get was something of an updated data from the census office. And so the data in Nevis changed. We wrote again, we did not, according to Ramdani's judgment, that there is no constitutional provision for the no constitutional mandate that we must consult. That we have no act, no law, legislation that we have to consult. But once you embark on consultation, it must be fair and proper.
Right.
And having embarked back in 2013, there was a lot of talk coming from some members of the commission and others that, oh, Ramdani says you don't have to consult. So we could just go back and do it in an hour and get it over with. I think that would have been improper. And the commission ultimately did vote to continue and to continue consulting.
Well, the question I would ask you, even though there's no legal obligation, isn't there somewhat of a moral obligation where you would like to get all hands or all heads together to make proper decisions and whatnot? I know sometimes we don't deal with that much. We deal with the law only.
Yes.
But isn't it, for the appearance of being proper and to dispel any issues of improprieties and whatnot, consultation would be, the best thing to do. And in my mind.
Yeah. Well, Greg, I think that you touched on a very important point. I don't want us to get away from the important discussion that we're having, but it is one of the factors that we must consider in our country as we go forward. Because we're doing this under the banner of Team Unity. And when Team Unity came together back in early 2013, at the basis of why we came together was that we needed to restore democracy, to have better governance in our country, and to have a new paradigm, a new way of doing things, a shift away from this sort of dictatorial one-manism that seemed to be what we are getting from Dr. Douglas. Dr. Douglas has portrayed himself as a strong man. You hear such terms as labor large and labor in charge. You know, we don't have to actually accept what other people say. You'll vote for us, so you take what we get, what we give you, you know. And I like to term it, it's something of an arrogance of power. I have power, so I'm going to use it as I like. And it has been indicative of so many things that have happened over the last couple of years. We have seen it with the Bastia High School fiasco, where the Minister of Education has been most arrogant, not wanting to have and engage with the parents, the teachers union. You know what I mean? It's dismissive of it. And if there can be some consultation where we exchange positions, that maybe we can get a better form of settling not just our differences and grievances, but improving our conditions, generally speaking. So consultation is something that I think the process of the last couple of years, and is now on the table, has to be going forward in our country very critical. And it has to do with the sense that citizens must be involved, whether through their organizations, being able to make proposals to public bodies, to ministers and ministerial in the development of our country. It should not just be the preserve of a party, of a minister, of an individual, but should be opened up to have better discussion. Young people know what they want. They're bright, intelligent. They're connected. They're on the internet. They see things all over the world. They have ideas that some of us older heads don't have. They should be given an equal opportunity to engage and exchange and really hold us accountable to the process of consultation.
Okay.
So the issue of consultation is, it should not be poo-pooed. It's not anything to be seen as being silly and so on, but it's very critical. And I would say that in Antigua, where there was a similar challenge to Boundaries Report, there too, the consultation process was the basis on which boundaries were rejected in Antigua. On that point as well. There are other points of bias and so on, as we had here. But the High Court and further the Appeal Court, the Court of Appeal afterwards, upheld the whole issue of doing away with the boundary report because of consultation.
Okay.
So we come full circle to where we are in 2014 late and the second boundaries report. And the commission is trying to see if we can, to deal with some of these issues of consultation. So very early, the commission makes its recommendation. Each member submits its recommendation. That recommendation goes to the consultees, the same people again.
Same people.
For their input to come back to us. Now, here's where we have some problems. When we started back, the people, the claimants, that is the elected majority in the parliament, challenged Ramdani's judgment. They struggled on the boundaries report. But they felt that because Ramdani had not dealt properly with the bias of the chairman, that they wanted to challenge that. Jenkins himself, as chairman, had written in an affidavit corroborative evidence of some of the jobs he had, the income he was making, his involvement, as it was, with the government. And we felt that plus the issue of other things that were happening, especially in the commission, should move a court to see an appearance of bias. It's the appearance. It doesn't have to be actual bias. It has to be an appearance of bias. And so that was being challenged in the Court of Appeal. That challenge is still there. And so when that was done, I went to the commission and said, Commission, I think we should deal with that first before we can move forward. Because if that is struck down, you know what I mean, what happens? But lo and behold, the commission after a while determined that we too would appeal the judgment of Ramdani. So we are saying that we don't agree that it should have been struck down, that the report that had been done in 2013 is a valid report. Ramdani was wrong on his point of consultation, and therefore that report is what we should be going forward with. But if you're appealing a report, suppose we are successful with the commission, you cannot have two reports.
Right.
The law prohibits that. The Constitution says you cannot produce another report in less than 2 years or more than 5 years. So that we would have had two reports, and then that would be a problem. And so that too became a cause of concern for me. We can't have two reports, we can't have two appeals ongoing, and we're still doing other work. Those should be clarified first. What is the state of that report we did? And so my recommendation was based on two basic factors. One, there's a motion of no confidence going for nearly 2 years. Why are we doing this? We're talking about boundaries and changing boundaries. The government more or less would have changed before, because 6 more than 5. And 6 members of parliament, elected members of parliament, say they do not support Dr. Douglas. We support one man, an alternative, Dr. Timothy Harris. And therefore, Harris, in the opinion of the 6, should be the Prime Minister. You don't need no boundary report for that. He does not have to hand it over to Harris, but there should at least be an election.
Of course.
And if Harris is being denied that, if the country is being denied that because of the manipulation of the Douglas regime and their collusion, I say, with a speaker who refuses time and again to table this motion of no confidence, we should not be doing other actions, other business to any boundaries report. That's the basis of my thing. First, that they are because of the motion of confidence, and secondly, we cannot be appealing. You cannot, the commission cannot be appealing, the elected majority cannot be appealing, and we're still going forward. That needed to be settled with. So that was my recommendations. This time it was a 1-page recommendation. The time before, it was 11 pages, by far the biggest recommendation. And that now was based on the question, again, of the motion of no confidence, but other factors as well. So, but other people made recommendations. The Marcella Liebert and Asim Martin both made the same recommendation on the two different bylines. But they made the same recommendation, where they are just taking numbers from each constituency based on the census data, and say move so many people from here, so many people from there, and move them to the next one,
right,
to equalize the constituencies. We're not looking at any maps. We're not looking at any sort of EDs. Just move the people. And that's the basis on which boundary changes are being made. Now, the People's Action Movement wrote and said, look, we have a difficulty with this process. We need to see enumeration district data. The same thing I'm telling you about. We want to see small area data, enumeration district data. We need to see the maps so we can make an informed decision of what to do. We also have a problem with the chairmanship of Mr. Jenkins. Timothy Harris, now PLP, Sam Connor, now PLP, also put in similar proposals, a similar request. Please, Mr. Commission, we need to get provided for us enumeration district data so that we can be able to make a proper proposal to the Commission. And Mr. Chairman, we think you are biased, and maybe you should step aside. So that was done by PAM, the PLP, 2 representatives, but also the Concerned Citizens Movement of Nevis, who said, look, we too require enumeration district data and maps. They got their invitation late. Mm-hmm. I should also point out that the concern of these consultants too was that they got a very short time to make the proposal. They were given 2 weeks initially, either 2 or 3 weeks, something like that. And they all complained that this is not enough time. We need to have more time to consider it, to meet and make proper recommendations. Vance Amory, the member of the commission, he too put in a recommendation. And he's very interesting because you spoke about consultation earlier. And he, in the first report in 2013, had requested that the commission go to Nevis on the ground to look at the situation in the various in the 3 constituencies there. And the commission did go to Nevis, did have a consultation in Nevis between 4 members of the CCM, top members, executive members, and 4 members of the NRP. So you had Vance Amory and his members of his executive, Mr. Parry, Joseph Parry, and chairman of the NRP were there as well. They all met. 8 of them sat on a table with the chairman of the Boundaries Commission and the secretary of the Boundaries Commission and had a meeting. They agreed to disagree, but there was a consensus. They came up to a consensus among themselves. Then they went actually on the ground where they're talking about where they wanted to go to. And it was where CCM didn't get everything they wanted, NRP didn't get everything they wanted, but in the end they were able to live with what they were being given in Nevis.
There was a compromise.
There was a compromise that the commission put its stamp on, and so in Nevis they had that in 2013. 2014 was rejected. No effort to go to Nevis. No talking between NRP and CCM. The members of the Labour Party on the commission made recommendations as how they wanted to see the changes in Nevis would be. And those are what were adopted. So that the NRP, when they came, said, okay, we see what the commission is saying, we accept what they're saying and agree to them. It was not the NRP's recommendations. It was the St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party's recommendations that went forward, or the members from them that went forward. Okay? And so Mr. Amory was concerned that they needed to go through the same process what they had before. This, of course, was not accepted. And so now we reach down to an impasse. There comes a back and forth. How much time to give them? Should we thing? The bottom line is the commission is not giving them enumeration district data. We're not giving them any maps. No, you can't have that. The commission not using them. So what you want them for? We're doing our own thing. You have a community that says 600 people, you move it. You don't know where the community borders are. Where are the bounds of such a community? But we know how many people we need to equalize from one constitution to another, but we don't know where the lines of demarcation are. So that, for instance, suppose we say New Road. Where is New Road? Where does the line go to New Road? Does John Brown live on one side of the one border and April Love live on the other side? Where do you draw the line? Who is in what constituency? Until you have a map that shows clearly where people live on one side of a border or not, you cannot really define what the boundaries are.
Agreed.
Huh?
Right.
And that has been the fundamental weakness for the last couple of years of what we have been doing. Anyway, I'll come to that again later. So the CCM is asking for this thing to happen. The commission right back, no, we don't agree, you know what I mean? We give you a week extension. And finally, we said this is going on for too long. 2nd December comes, we meet to make a determination. And we start with St.Kitts. And in that, there are certain adjustments. We say that Constitution 1 doesn't change. Constitution number 2 doesn't change. Now, Earl Mastin, Asim Martin, he's on the commission. So he doesn't want his constitution to change. Marcella Liebert is on the commission. She doesn't want the constitution to change. All the others are going to change. But those two on the commission don't change their constituencies. And they say, well, they're near to the equal to the mean. They're near to the average constituency. So that is okay. And it's surprising because when the recommendations had gone out initially, there were certain recommendations that made to move 572 inhabitants out of Frigate Bay in St. George, constituency 1, and put them in 8. Now in the final recommendation, we don't do that. No real reason is given. In 2, you were to move Greenlands into West Bastille. Okay? And we were to take all the way up to Carifesta Village, New Road, Clico, in St. Peter's, were to come into 2. That is scrapped. So we don't have any changes now. And so on and so on. So there are changes for St. Kitts that are made. Van Saby, who is there, has to leave and says he's very concerned what's happening in Nevis. He'd want to be there. So we don't make a decision then and we put it off. But we finally do on the 15th. And the chairman then leaves to go away to write the report, a draft report, based on what we had been discussing, to come back to us. And here now we start the parliamentary issues of what happened. On the 18th of December, that's 3 days after the final sitting to decide the final recommendations in Nevis, lawyers for the elected majority in Parliament write to Prime Minister Douglas. They write to the chairman of the Constitutional Boundaries Commission, Mr. Jenkins, and they state to him, say to both of them, look, we hear that you're going to write a report and produce a report. But our clients say that they need advice as to whether what has been done is correct and proper. And so we are asking you that if a report is published, that you give us 5 days to review the report and maybe make some sort of application to the court so that we can review it properly. Now, we have come to you at this time because, look, next week is Christmas. 3 days to go. 3 days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, then Thursday, Friday is Christmas and Boxing Day. The following week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, then you have New Year's Day, right, and so on. And the idea that was put up by these lawyers, well, look, we don't want, during the Christmas and everything going on, that you suddenly run into court. You want to run into Parliament. That you suddenly run into Parliament.
Try something.
And it can be while everybody jamming and nobody watching. So if you're going to have a report, please tell us and give us some time to study it. So that the government, the Prime Minister, the Constitutional Boundary Commission knew since the 18th of December that the report was going to be challenged. They were aware. They were told that, look, when you finish with the report, we want to see it to see if we can look at it. And we might have to challenge it in court because we are dissatisfied with certain things in it. The Prime Minister to date, Denzel Douglas to date, up to today, has not responded to that letter as I speak. The chairman of the Boundaries Commission did not respond until about the 6th of January, when members were written with a draft response for us to okay it so he could send it out. Well, I was of the opinion, and I had that difficulty before, that we are not supposed to take decisions of that nature outside a meeting of the commission. And so we did not send anything, and the commission met on the 13th, the following week. And at that meeting, it was said, we are under no obligation to let you see the report beforehand. There's no constitutional reputation, and so on. And so that letter went out from the commission. Van Seymour and I voted against it. The others voted for it. We don't have to tell you anything about any report or what we're going to do. Okay? Mm-hmm. Labor large and in charge. The arrogance of power. Okay? And so, what went on? But, here's the nub. At that meeting, at which we were supposed to have seen a draft report, instead, the chairman turns up, guess what? With maps and a definition now of these same new constituencies. So for the very first time since we started all of this rule again the second time, we don't see maps until 3 days before the report is due. And we have to look at these maps and say, oh, this is really what we mean. That's what happened. We also had a description of the constituency boundaries 3 days before. For the first time we get to understand what it is being meant. And if, for instance, the constituency between 1 and 2 is going to be the same, 1 and 2, and the boundary is the same, as it has always been for a long time. Let me give you an example of what the description is. It is a straight line going from the waterfront up to 4th Street, continuing through Victoria Road, and a straight line going to the parish boundary. Do we know where the parish boundary is? Would the normal city know where the parish boundary is?
I don't think so.
There's a parish boundary between St. George, where Bass is, and St. Peter. And it comes along the foothills of Monkey Hill. Okay? I can't describe it properly, but it cuts to certain areas. But this straight line from the Victoria Road, the top of Victoria Road where the Moravian church is, a straight line goes where? Does it go through Taylor's Village? Does it go through New Road? Does it tear off and go through, say, Shadwell? Where does that straight line go? How could you know it without having a map?
A map to see. Yes.
Where are we taking the numbers of people from one and putting another? I should preface it by saying, remember, in 1980s, all they used to be Canefield. So it never really mattered. Now we have people living there. Let me give you an example. The description of the boundary between Central Bastia and West Bastia starts by the sea, down by Fort Thomas Hotel. And it's a straight line up through Wigley Avenue, that road there, coming all the way up to the cemetery. It goes to the middle of the cemetery. and continues to the parish boundary? Does it go up the gut? Where is Shadwell? Is it on one side or the other? Pine Gardens. Where does the line go? How could somebody make a recommendation without actually seeing a map where you want to draw that? Where do people live on one side or the other side of the boundary? And that is indicative of what has happened all over in terms of it. Some constituencies, it's much more straightforward. Mm-hmm. Like I mentioned in Sandy Point, the parish of St. Anne's, number 5. And the recommendation was to add Newton Ground, the whole of Newton Ground. So you could see how you could add those. But the classic case that is great confusion is between constitution number 9 and constitution number 10 in Nevis, where no one understood where that line was going to be. 9 and 10 in Nevis. 9 happens to be the parish of St. Paul, where Charlestown is, and the parish of St. John. And St. John used to be sparsely populated, but a lot of people are living there. You have villages in St. John, Coal Hill, Cox, Beaumont, Montpellier, St. Peter's. Let's go back many years. You have Brown Hill, but they're not clearly defined where one begins and one starts. Ends. When the preliminary data, the census data came out, the data says Coal Hill, 292 people. There's no data for Cox. There's no data for Beaumont. These are names that are actually, if you were to see a publication on any constituency list, monthly list, these are names that are on the description, but there's no data to see whether they're going to stay or be moved. And so when Mark Brantley would have said, look, they want to move Coal Hill, but they're not moving Cox. They want to move Brown Hill with data for. They're not moving Cherry Gardens. You did not know. And you had to assume that they're going to take a Brown Hill to put it to go with Gingerland and Coal Hill to go with Gingerland. These are Mark Brantley's strongholds, and leave Cox to stay in St. John to gerrymander, to change it, to get an advantage. There was no map when we made our initial recommendation. But now we see a recommendation. Now we see a map. On the 13th, for the first time, I wanted to do that, take a big slice out of St. John that we didn't imagine that it would be. And the question is, how do you draw that line without an enumeration district map to know that you're moving 1,792 people? How you know you're not moving 1,200? Are you not moving 500? Just an arbitrary map? So these were some of the things that occurred on the 13th when we now get to the question of having the maps and final decisions. I could not accept them at that stage and those types of descriptions. We come back on the Friday now. We had a little hiccup because then Miss Amy was traveling on state business, and the question is when we're going to meet again. The 13th, Tuesday the 13th. It's only a long time ago. But there was no suggestion then there was going to be parliament. None whatsoever. But remember, we had told the commission, if you can produce a report, the opposition wants to see it. I ain't seen that same day, no report yet, you know. No report. So the Friday, Amory says I'm going away. I'll be only back till next Tuesday. Can we have the meeting next Tuesday? Man, Mr. Amory, we're going over this thing too long. We have to do it, man. He's going to run government business. So he was poo-pooed. He's not going. He said tentatively for Friday at 1 o'clock. Thursday he called, boy, you think I should go? I said, boy, I really don't know. Friday morning he decides he's going to cancel, postpone traveling. because he wants to be at that final meeting, that meeting to see the report, because something seems suspicious. We get a reminder. And we go to the meeting at 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock come, nobody there. Mr. Jenkins arrives at about 1:45, and the meeting starts at about 2 minutes to 2. And we get, for the first time, a draft report of the Constituency Boundaries Commission. We had not seen it before. Mr. Jenkins had gone away and he's writing it. So I said, well, Mr. Jenkins, we just seen it. Can I take it away to be able to study it? We have had weeks of meetings. I have my notes or my minutes. I don't have them with me. But I should be able to study them to see if you have captured all the decisions that we have made. I'm voted down. We have voted down. Mr. Amir supports it because he says, no. You all know what has been going on all along. There's nothing to review. There's nothing, no decisions to change. So no. And did a vote, 3-2. And we go through. I go through. I said, look, section 4. I see proposals from everybody except Mr. Byron. I said, I made a proposal and not here. Oh, is it true? So they rush off and they bring a 1 page to put in my name and bring it back to insert it, to make amendments. Okay. And I asked some questions about the maps. Valid questions. Mr. Jenkins, I think the commission needs to know who have drawn these maps. All this time we ain't seen the maps. Do they reflect, and I'll certainly reflect what we want? Who drew these maps? Here first he wouldn't answer. Then he said, I was responsible for the report. I said, okay. But we need to know who drew the maps, Mr. Jenkins. I think it's only fair if we are a member of the commission that we know how these maps are drawn. Reluctantly, he said, I drew he kept repeating himself. Eventually, so I asked him, well, you say you respond. Does that mean that you drew them? He said, can't I draw them? I said, I don't know, but you tell me. He said, with technology, I said, that's true. But are you the person who drew them? Eventually, he said, well, no. Miss Beverly Harris. I said, Miss Beverly Harris drew them? He wouldn't say. I said, well, are you saying that she drew them or she got somebody to draw them? He had not confirmed that yet. Then I asked her, is Miss Harris a draftsman? He admitted that she's not a draftsman. I said, okay, thank you. So here we have a situation where I asked him again, and I think it's important to know, what instructions was Miss Harris given from the commission to draw these maps? He said, well, Miss Harris knows the data. She put together the communities, and so she would know the boundaries of where they are. I said, thank you. And so that is how we got to that point. Mr. Amory queried the fact that he needed an amendment to the report to show that he had a concern that we had not gone to Nevis to do the same type of process that we had done the year before. There was a vote to that, and he was voted against. I supported him, but the others voted against him again, 3-2. And that was the general process. And ultimately, we came to this position of what next? Was asked. He said, well, are you all willing to sign? And I said, I was not willing to sign because I had these deep concerns of how the maps were drawn. I cannot say if they reflect the decisions of the commission. The maps cannot, in my mind, be verified to say, as I pointed out in St. John, be moving 1,792 inhabitants from the constituency number 9 in constituency number 10, when we did not know how the maps were drawn. We did not have the benefit of any enumeration district data, the benefit of any enumeration district maps. And so that dismemberment could be flawed, and more than likely is. And on that basis and other bases like that, I felt that it was being done improperly, and I would not sign. Mr. Amory had a similar concern as well, and the fact that there are a number of issues that he was not involved in relation to that thing. The other 3 members signed it. And the meeting ended at 3:45. Taking a long time to give all the background, but this really is what happened. I've tried to give a process of the boundaries. There's one thing I need to say, and I think it's very, very important, and forgive me and those who see it. It has to do with one of the proposals that went to the Boundaries Commission. I made the point that the Ms. Leibert and Asim Martin each gave proposals how the boundaries should be in St.Kitts. And maybe I should say what those proposals were. And I pointed out already that the Commission eventually adopted the fact that there should be no changes in East, no changes in Central. In West, the proposal was eventually, that was adopted by the Commission, that Boyd's, West Farm, and Palmetto Point be dismembered from Constitution number 3 and put with Constitution number 4. That then would be the new Constitution number 4 with what was already there. In Constitution number 5, Newton Ground should be taken from Constitution number 6 and put with Sandy Point to be the new number 5. And the new number 6 will go from St. Paul's, include the Ebbe, Parsons, Sadlers, Harris's, and would now include Bellevue and Tabernacle, would now become part of number 6. Having cut off a significant portion of number 7 in terms of Tabernacle and Bellevue, 7 now becomes Mansions on Christchurch, Molyneux Phillips's, Lodge, Bowyer, Utley's, and Keon. Keon will be cut off from number 8 and become part of number 7 now. And so 8 now would be Keys, Connery, and St. Peter's will now be number 8. So that basically has been the realignment of these proposed new boundaries. And I say that to say that despite the fact that PAM had been requesting to have data, enumeration district data, small area data provided to them, to have maps, they did make a provisional proposal, which I want to speak about, because I think it's important to understand the travesty that was being perpetrated on us and the clear misinformation that is being bandied about. Remember when I started off that one of the criteria, the primary criteria for boundary changes is that there should be near equality of inhabitants in each constituency. Well, the 2011 census in St. Kitts counts the population at 34,940, I think it is. If you were to divide that figure by the 8 constituencies on St. Kitts, you get an average size constituency of something like 4,373 inhabitants. That's the average, that's the mean, that's the benchmark. Everyone can be 4,373. So you could go a little over and a little below. Statistically called that you can deviate from the mean, the average, accordingly. So for instance, a constitution can be 4,500, 4,600. One can be 4,100, and so on. You're not exactly 4,373, but you can move away from that average. It's interesting to note that in the the 2013 recommendations that went to Parliament and were struck down, those recommendations were all within less than a 10% of the average, the deviation, moving away. And it's interesting to know that figure of 10%, because in 2013, Master Lambert appended to her report an extract from the Barbados Constitution that shows that it's part of their constitution that you cannot have a constituency that is greater than 10% from the average, not in of inhabitants, which is a totally different issue, but of voters. But there is that deviation. 10% is a sort of benchmark. So that in 2013, none of them were over 10% in terms of inhabitants. In 2014, the recommendations that were adopted by the Commission, 5 out of 8 of our constituencies are greater than 10% from the average. Some as high as 17%, 16%, 15%. 5 out of the 10 of the 8 have a greater than thing. So in terms of this magical equality that Dr. Douglas speaks about, this question of fair boundaries that they speak about, why are so many of the constituencies greater than 10%, so much greater than that? We have a constituency as little as 3,600, away from the 4,373. We have another one over 5,000. So there is this still inequality. But hear it up. In the PAM proposal, not one of the 8 constituencies were close to the 10%. They're all within that range, that narrow range. And they were all rejected. Every one of them was rejected. They didn't accept one.
Did they say why?
Huh?
Did they say why?
They said there was not enough reasons given, a proper reason given, which is not true. Their proposal just had figures, but there was a narrative as to what the PAM proposal was. Here's a simple example. There has been a number of internal migration in St. Kitts. And each one of us know that people from Central Bastille, McKnight, from Newtown, have been moving northwards in the Bastille Valley. That is why we have New Road. New Road is expanding. That is why we have Shadwell, Pine Gardens, Gillard Meadows. Bastille has moved above the airport and has expanded. We're all in the Bastille Valley still. We're in St. George. You understand? Apart Gillard Meadows in St. Peter's. Okay? But there's that movement northwards. Expansion of Bastille. So that the traditional arrangement of a East Bastille constituency, a Central Bastille constituency, and a West Bastille constituency, PAM says we need to look at it. We need to review it. Why it is, and they recommended that why don't you have a North Central constituency and a Central West? East Bastille will still come up to 4th Street, as it does now. And a Central West starts at 4th Street, going westwards below Keon Street. Greenlands and so on will still be part of that. West, Central West. But North Central now would be Dorset, Shadwell, and Wades Garden, and you're going into New Road and so on. So they've reconfigured the arrangements to reflect the migration within Bastille. There's a rationale for it. There was a reason why it was done. We're not saying it is the proper one, but the basis for major discussion in our country. We have to think about, as we develop and move, more people will go to Shadwell to live. New Road and Gillard Meadows will expand. And so there's that need to reconfigure as it was. So we accept that. So that was the recommendation. Then there are questions of this sparsely populated rural areas that we speak about. that, for instance, you look at St. Thomas's Parish, that goes, say, from Palmetto Point all the way down to Halfway Tree. It's a long parish. And for that matter, because we have reconfigured the Central Bastille and the West Bastille, we now see that coming up all the way up to Limekeel. And it's still along. And so you don't really need to get this exact 4,373, but you can have it smaller, but within the 10% deviation. And look for because of the vast area, you have a small amount and you use that as the basis. So the boundaries as such is an issue. And there needs to be thought. There needs to be an approach to be done for the development, sustainable development of what we're doing. It is not supposed to be done just to get an advantage. And I don't really want to talk about the political advantages or disadvantages.
Right.
Anyway, so it was important for me to put that. So there have been alternatives. There was a proper alternative that was put before the commission that was rejected out of hand. And I say that alternative was vastly superior to what the commission had and the other recommendations. It's important for us to understand that.
Well, given that background, and given that there was an alternative put forward, we now saw the situation that came up on Friday the 16th and everything.
Yes.
Could you tell us? I mean, because it still leaves a lot of confusion in people's minds as to what exactly took place. You know, there was almost a shock factor to it. Yeah. You know, nobody seemed to know exactly what happened, what took place exactly.
That's right.
You know, so go ahead.
I was asking if we could have a short pause for a minute.
Sure, just pause there.